So first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone. This is part of our sales hacks series. We do these every 2 weeks. And the purpose of these calls are really to help us learn from each other, have special guests like Michael who can join us and teach us some incredible insights. We also want to make sure that we use these to focus on our skill sets in terms of sales and finding the best practices in the industry to help improve that science. Now, Michael has a pretty interesting background, and he'll talk a little bit about that here in a second, but I just wanted to give a quick introduction for everybody. But Michael is really a legendary MSP sales coach. He's spent a long time working with companies like Cisco, IBM, AT&T, Siemens, Motorola, but essentially his whole purpose is to help companies understand a magic formula that his company, Taylor Business Group, has put together in terms of helping MSPs overcome growth challenges. Because a lot of times they'll go out and hire sales reps, marketing companies, and they really won't get anywhere. And so what they do is they've created this formula and applied this formula so many different times across different MSPs across the country and helped them double their revenue and help them in so many different ways, but they also help hold them accountable to this model. But I'll let Michael dive into this a little bit more about what he does and what this is all about. So go ahead, Michael. I'll turn the mic over to you.
Well, thank you, Justin, and welcome everybody. It's as Justin said, I came from an enterprise environment, and the only difference is a lot of the changes that are hitting the kind of mid-size MSP these days are challenges that those folks kind of faced 15 years ago. There's really no difference between the challenges you're facing in terms of generating opportunities or managing client relationships that those folks also didn't face. The difference is that at the MSP level, because they're smaller businesses, some of the changes are kind of dramatic and overwhelming at times. So a lot of what we do actually is basically train the owners and leadership team members of an MSP about what they have to know or what their competency has to be in order to drive sales. And I don't know, the mix of people out there, but a lot of the clients we have come up through the technical track, and they don't have a familiarity with like business development. They may be good themselves, but they really don't know how to achieve sales results through others very well. So a lot of what we do is really teaching people how to put a blueprint in place and give them them and their leadership team the skills they need to focus on what matters in terms of sales, and we can go into that. I think the big thing that people have to realize, and where the starting point I usually have, is basically when you make the transition between any kind of product-centric sales into something that's more service-centric, it's a completely different sales process. And I think people got to come to terms with that. I think that's the essential change that matters. In services sales, what happens is almost the sales process is really almost like a dress rehearsal about what it's going to feel like to be your client. So the sales process is much more consultative and much more kind of business advisor driven. And that's a big sales change for many people that even were in product sales at one point. So it's those two big changes. It's the nature of the buying process that's different, and it's also the nature of the kind of sales process from the client standpoint is completely different. That's really the starting point. What I find then too is you got to think about the sales process as almost two very distinct segments. There's the kind of getting brand new MRR clients in the door. And then there's a whole other side about how to manage the client relationships once they are in the door. And again, both of those things are very different from a product-centric model. So a lot of what we've done is really just say, your experience in transitioning from a VAR or product-centric company of any kind requires pretty dramatic change in the way you sell, in the way you manage client relationships. That's really the starting point, Justin.
Well, that's really interesting. I think I personally have seen this a lot working with different MSPs and just talking to different folks. It seems like there are a number of challenges, but what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that they have to overcome these this growth strategy? It seems like they're kind of
I would say, yeah. So let's split it into the two sides. Like on the net new side, is the one frankly the only metric we've ever found that matters in the sales side for net new clients is you really got to be driving fundamentally 2 high-quality discovery meetings a week, and almost everything else from that is derivative. You know, your conversion ratios, your proposal wins, and all that stuff. Because what really drives success is that if you have 8 of these meetings a month, you're pretty much guaranteed to sell 2 or 3 pretty significant MRR deals each month. And for many of our clients, some of our clients are smaller, so they might be in the anywhere from $2 to $10 million range. And frankly, it's difficult for them to onboard many more than 2 sales a month. So the whole thing comes down to is if you can consistently drive 2 meetings a week with a decision maker at a mid-sized business, you're going to have a pretty thriving MSP practice. So the natural question comes: how do you drive 2 meetings a week? and the answer becomes a couple of things. Number one, and if I had one message for everybody here, is I would say strive to hire the absolute best sales talent you can, no matter what it costs you, no matter how hard you have to look, because that's ultimately what matters. Is if you got the best people in the marketplace, you're going to get the best results. Sounds kind of obvious, but I don't think you can have any shortcuts on that side. And then second thing is that there's no one method that it's actually going to create the 2 a week. There's probably a series of about 5 or 6 things, and I can go through the list here in a second. But there's 5 or 6 portfolio of 5 or 6 processes or activities that you got to do each and every week in order to guarantee that you're going to have the 2 meetings. And I'll just go through the list pretty quickly. It's number one, there always has to be some kind of telephone prospecting component to that. Simply because what you're really doing in the marketplace is you're sorting through all the people that you're contacting and trying to find the 1 or 2 that have had enough recent pain related to their technology that they're willing to meet. And we've seen that number be something like you got to contact 100 people or 200 people a week to be able to find those 2 just by the phone. The second one, and this is where Ensemble actually comes in, is we're working together in a partnership now. So your capability to identify strategic reasons to call a short list of prospective clients, I think, is the next forefront in being able to convert a lot of those 2 meetings a week. Is having some kind of rules-based sales approach on a hit list of clients that you have and have a reason to call them, I think is another way that hopefully our clients are going to hit that 2 a week. In general, then, the 2 other activities that seem to drive these meetings is coming up with, and your guys are good in this too, is you really have to have some pretty strong alliances in the marketplace at a salesperson to salesperson level in order for you to drive those 2 meetings a week as well. Fourth is you got to have a strong, you got to pick 1 or 2 business-related associations and work them from a business development standpoint. And then the 5th one is you have to not wait for referrals to come to you. You actually have to have a proactive way to drive referrals. I have a client, for example, in Portland who's basically the owner is the sales force, but he's so well connected, basically his sales plan is spending 4 hours a week calling people that he knows and asking for introductions, referrals, and going out to 2 lunches a week. And with that, like I say, he's about 8 to 10 million now. He's been able to sell a steady stream of 2 MSP engagements a month, in the $5,000 to $10,000 fee range. So the long-winded way of saying that you need to do it. I actually think of those as like pillars. You got to do all of those things in order to get to 2. And if you're not doing one of them, the odds of you hitting those 2 meetings a week is kind of iffy.
Well, that's very helpful. I was curious if you could tell us a little bit more about what you mean by strong alliances. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
So an alliance, so I'll give it two very different. One would be more traditional, one would be different. Actually, there's kind of 3 worth talking about. The number one, so a lot of our people, for example, are partners with Cisco. And right now, Cisco's big push is on Meraki. So what you'll find is that people at the Salesforce level need to connect. So what you'll see is they don't necessarily have they don't really rely so much on the formal programs Cisco has, but the people that are driving a lot of business through Cisco basically meet with the salespeople in their local marketplace and kind of jointly come up with a hit list between the two companies. So they would be introducing people, the MSP would be introducing Cisco into clients where they're not currently using Meraki, and vice versa. The Meraki salespeople would be introducing them into their prospects and clients. So the main thing in that alliance level, it really has to happen at the salesperson to salesperson level for it to actually pay off. Your partners have to see you as being basically part of them making quota, and vice versa. So that's the one thing we've seen to work, and it's similar with other kind of vendors as well. And the other quick thing on that side too, there's a lot of our clients are coming up with joint offerings on the private cloud side, where they actually team with somebody that's hosting and somebody that's more like an integrator. So two ways to do it is partner at the salesperson level, and then two is come up with fully integrated joint offerings. The other kind of alliance, though, would be people like, for example, a lot of our MSPs partner with people that are website developers or accounting firms, and they will actually work out an arrangement by which they kind of cross-refer people as well. And all that really for all of that to work, it can't be kind of like a programmatic thing and from a corporate level. It's really one-on-one. It's like, in one example for MSP up in Detroit, partnered with a website development company, and I believe they got 18 clients, net new clients in 1 year, and at least a third of those came from that one relationship. So I would encourage everybody on the phone to alliances are really, really important in terms of kind of getting the volume of activity that you need to get success.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot as well, because when you're aligning yourself with another partner, for instance, you'll find that you can cut the workload in half for every alliance that you have, because you're basically splitting the workload, talking to both types of clients, and creating a complementary product that strengthens the overall proposition for the client. So I think that's a really genius approach.
Yeah, and it's actually I think in generally true, even in the big companies too, is success really comes down to kind of like one-to-one connections between the salespeople on both sides, because it's really, somebody that's truly wants to be a partner with you in a sense. Somebody that actually is willing to go out of their way to refer you business and go and participate enough so that you can help them to develop business. So it's really happens at the human level, not necessarily the kind of corporate level.
Yeah, I also liked your number 2 is creating a reason to call. One of the things that I've seen that works really well in this area is, and something we see a lot lately is mergers. So one company buys another company. And so a lot of times the customers are a little bit confused, and it takes a while for these larger companies to come out with a statement about how this is going to translate into new services and what this is actually, what are the ramifications of this merger. And so if you can personally get some insights on what you can expect and help calm their nerves a little bit, you can have a lot of great conversations with folks at those intersections.
Yeah, because if you think about it from a practical standpoint, like one of our clients just had an example of this. It was a printing company in Ohio, bought 2 other printing companies and are trying to integrate them. And what you'll find is when you look in mergers, like a lot of the synergies and like the financial projections are based on how well these 2 companies are going to integrate. And frankly, it very rarely happens. And one of the big integration points is in all the systems. Like if you're buying 3 different companies, all 3 different companies have a different ERP system or a different, even just different physical locations. There's a huge benefit for an MSP going in and say, we can help you kind of rationalize and consolidate this more quickly so that your company gets the full benefits they're expecting out of this merger and acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of these companies are just concerned, and there's a good opportunity to take advantage of that, especially early on, like I said, because there's always a lot of question marks. I was also curious about, that you talked a little bit about business associations. Could you tell us a little bit about maybe some examples and how to approach those and how to actually work those?
Yeah, so two good examples, or two very fruitful examples, I guess, for us are, I don't know if you're familiar with this organization called EO. It's based on the book Traction, and I guess they have a lot of followers. But what it basically is kind of a group of owners of companies that get together and talk about, different aspects of business and how they're addressing it. And a lot of our clients are members of that group. And what that allows you to do is, and again, this would be for the owners, first of all, I'll go to a different example in a second, is the owners then can connect as business people and really just have a peer-to-peer discussion about, what's going on in the client's business, what's going on in their business. And, there's a lot of value for your owner doing that kind of stuff, because they can have a network that's of a different kind of quality than the salespeople that work for them. So it's really important for owners to do that kind of stuff. And the really important thing in an association, though, is that you actually have a specific plan about like which members you're going to meet, how many you're going to try to meet a month, who's going to set it up, all those little kind of tactical details that the salespeople are all good at. Because oftentimes owners just kind of join it and go to meetings and expect stuff to happen. It doesn't work that way. You really got to have fundamentally a business plan for every association that you're involved in. For those of us who are not owners, the other thing to join is much more, if you see a lot of people like yourself in an association meeting, you're probably going to want to belong to it. So where I always recommend is that people join associations where it's mostly clients or prospective clients. So if I was going after an industry, what I would do is I'd talk to 2 or 3 of my clients to see, what associations they belong to, and go to those meetings. So, things like chambers of commerce and all that tend to be, you can do that, but they don't have the payoff that you would have. So, for example, one of our clients got really involved in the Supply Chain Association, and noticed that when he and his team actually went to those meetings, they were actually meeting people that were VP of operations at manufacturing companies or wholesalers. It was, very few, almost no MSPs, and very few technology people other than application vendors. By the way, application vendors are really good for MSPs to team up with too. But the whole thing then is to join associations which are predominantly attended by, people that are prospective clients. And then 2 is similarly, then you have to have a sales plan or a business development plan for that. You want to make sure that you have a list of the association members. You want to know which ones or can get introduced to. It's really working it at a kind of tactical level that matters in terms of getting those 2 meetings a week.
I think that's great because it creates a nice common denominator where you're not just reaching out to people at random. And I also think that there may be some gaps within the association world that we could probably take advantage of as a salesperson, where you can say, look, this specific industry doesn't have much of a presence here in this market. Maybe I can form our own association and kind of own that whole space.
And so as you're selecting them, too, a good rule of thumb is people say, well, we're not really, we may not be highly specialized in an industry. But this is actually true. When I was at Accenture, we actually found this out, too, is if you have 3 clients in an industry, you're a specialist because you pretty much know more about that business than you think you do, So, for example, a lot of our guys would say that they had kind of 3 law firm clients, and they thought that wouldn't be enough. But as long as you can translate that knowledge into a sales process that allows you to demonstrate that you understand that business and how it affects the people at the company, then you can treat it as a specialty.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's nothing that lowers customer acquisition costs more than specializing in something. And so it's something that we all resist, but if you're really interested in accelerating growth, it's that specialization that needs to come into play, and working with associations can help solidify a lot of that, I think.
Yeah, because the reason that it makes sense, and I always go back to this, is because customers care, or prospective customers care if you know their industry, right? It's not us. It's not up to us to decide that. They've already decided that. So if you go with the flow, you know what I mean? If you go with the flow, then you just kind of go where they're at and kind of understand more about what they care about, and it just makes complete sense from a buying process standpoint.
Yeah, and we see a lot of different niche markets popping up because of the way software applications are easier to develop than hardware. It's just a niche-based play, and your ability to kind of grasp that world that's developing within all these different niches is really what's going to separate you and ultimately lower your customer acquisition costs.
Yep. And then just to touch on the other side of it too, the other challenge I found for MSP is on the client account management side. And really, I guess the danger there, or actually, how do I say this exactly? The thing you need to do there is you actually have to evolve to the point where you guys are seen as a business advisor by your clients, as opposed to somebody that's just selling a product or churning their servers or whatever. And that takes a lot of work. What I find on the client account management side is MSPs will go to their clients and they'll have, there's people that give them methodologies and all that, so they produce all these reports and statistics. And frankly, what you'll find out if you talk to your clients is they really don't care about those statistics. They care that they're getting an ROI on their money, but what they really care about is themselves and their business and how to make it more successful. And what they care about most then is a dialogue with you about what they're trying to accomplish and how technology can help them. So it's actually the quality of that business dialogue that you have, which actually makes your clients see you as more valuable. And what I see is a lot of sales behavior that actually works against that. I see a lot of the client account management behavior actually almost genericizing our services as opposed to being value added. So that's the other caution I would have for people.
And I think that's a good point, maybe even a good segue. Do you think that customer, revenue growth would be faster through new logos or through account management with existing clients? I mean, what's your opinion there?
So I'll show you. So like a lot of our clients I've worked with pretty continuously for the last 3.5 years, and I think all of them have doubled in size. And the reason that they double in size is because they get the effect from both sides. So you should see like a net new MRR, you should be getting kind of, in their case, they get 2 a month almost continuously. And then on the account management side, you should see 33% growth year over year within your client base in terms of revenue sold to existing clients. So it's actually the compound effect. So like one of our guys was kind of small. He went from $1 to $2 million, and in he actually went to 3. What he did was 1 year that was predominantly net new stuff, but then he put a client account management person in place, and the kind of net new side didn't keep up with that pace, but he still doubled because he got the client side benefit. So you're really the answer is you're doing a great job when you're getting both effects, and it's not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're just about out of time, but we'll probably take some time to do a few questions. So if anybody has any questions, you can jump into the chat now and we can address those. But just to kind of recap what we've talked about so far, the biggest challenge, I think, from what Michael's experience has been, is that owners of MSPs don't necessarily have a strong sales background. It's more technical, and so they need some help in terms of trying to understand how to execute this whole sales strategy. And oftentimes they try to outsource it, and it doesn't necessarily work that well. And so it sounds like the best strategy is to go out and hire the best salespeople in the industry regardless of cost, because the truth of the matter is the best employees are always free because they make more money than they cost. And so I think that's probably something to keep in mind, is that don't worry about spending a lot of money on someone that's actually going to produce you a lot of money. But it's also about executing the right strategy where you're using time elements in terms of reaching out to customers and also aligning yourselves with others to help carry the burden of the sales execution strategy and working with other vendors, referral partners, and trying to spread that workload out. But I haven't seen any questions yet, but anything else you wanted to add, Michael?
No, I just wanted to go back to I did really start out with talent for a reason, is that I've seen the difference between like average talent and superb talent. And two things I would say. One is, if a salesperson doesn't work out, then it's my fault as an owner. It's not this person's fault. It's either I didn't hire the right person or I didn't support them. And second of all is, your main job is kind of like being a college football coach in a sense. You want to be recruiting kind of blue chip talent in order to come join your company, because the difference between that person and just an average person is like night and day. One last thing on the talent side too. The other thing you got to realize from the emotional standpoint, MSP sales is hard because what happens is you got to do a whole bunch of prospecting. You got to stay energetic. You got to stay at it in the face of a lot of rejection. And the most you're going to sell in a month is one or two engagements. So that's a completely different sales emotion than you get on the product side. On the product side, you're always selling something. You always got proposals going. There's always activity. It's a very different emotional side on the MSP sales side too. So you got to recruit for that in terms of temperament and capability. We recruit a lot of salespeople, and I tell you, I just did a newsletter on this. Is the one thing that matters. Like, if you can almost throw out everything else, but if you're going to hire an outside salesperson in the MRR business, first of all, they don't need to know anything about technology at all. And then two is, what they need to be able to do is to prove to you that they've been getting their own appointments with the same kind of people for 2-3 years. Because if they can't get the appointments, they're going to fail. There's no two ways about it. So we've had real good success with people that came on a payroll or just like fields that have nothing to do with IT.
Interesting. Well, that's a good point. I think, following those trends and trying to find those types of personalities is key.
Yeah.
We did have a few questions come through. Gary had asked, how important is sales support functions in support of account management?
It's vital, actually, because what you really want to do is, one of the principles in Salesforce productivity is, you want your salespeople and your client account managers spending almost 100% of their time in front of clients. So if you find them doing very much administrative things, or if they're in charge of proposals, that's actually a waste of their time, honestly. So all of our clients will hire somebody to handle the sales operation sides and sales admin sides, so that our guys are not quoting.
Very nice. Yeah, I think that focus will definitely help them out. And then Jeremy had asked, how many reps? How does the company know how many reps to hire?
And this is going to sound like a strange way to respond to that, but as many as you can make successful. Two quick points on that. Number one is, you can't mix the roles. Like, it's very difficult to have somebody who's a net new person I'm speaking specifically IT MSP space. It's very difficult to have somebody be both a net new person and a client account manager, because they'll always migrate to the client account side. So you always want to have a dedicated person for net new.
I think that makes sense, because I've seen a lot of folks that do a little bit of both, and then if you take them back to that net new, they're just not conditioned for that anymore, and it's really hard for them to get back into that groove.
Yeah, and they can't do the volume that's required. I mean, it literally is a full-time job. So I'd say, what you can count on, just to factor it out, is you can count on an outside person who's good selling 2 a month. So if that fits with your goals. But I wouldn't go out and hire like a whole bunch of them unless you're confident that you can make them all successful, because that actually sets you back like 3 steps.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, it's the top of the hour, so out of respect of everyone's time, we try to keep this short and sweet. But if you do have any questions afterwards that you'd like us to forward on to Michael, if you would like to get in touch with him, just let us know. You can find him on LinkedIn. You can connect with him, or we can get you his contact information. But again, thanks everyone for joining us today. The recorded version of this will be made available later for your review, and we look forward to seeing you on our next call. Thanks, everyone.